Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Milrad. I'm the founder of Movie Karma with a nonprofit organization that created our podcast, Rewriting Hollywood, which focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and representation in Hollywood, as well as social impact, and really looking at the power of storytelling and how it can be a force for change and for social good. I'm really excited to have another incredible guest on our podcast today, who I'm sure you've seen over the years in many, many projects of note. Her name is Cassie Freeman. And Cassie's done just a variety of really exciting artistic work, but also has, I think, some really meaningful things to say around a lot of the issues that we cover here in our podcast. You'll see her in Bel-Air coming up again for season 2 on February 23rd on Peacock. Also in some really exciting upcoming films and projects, which we'll be talking about today. And so excited to dive in with Cassie. Cassie, thank you so much for being on my podcast. Great to have you on.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely. So Cassie, I want to start with where we usually like to start. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and your journey, if you'd want to indulge us on that, and just tell us a little bit about kind of your upbringing, and did you have mentors coming up who encouraged you to go into acting? What was that process like of sort of figuring out where you wanted to go in this industry?
I always say that I didn't know I always wanted to be an actress until I got to high school. By the time I got to high school, I thought I was going to be like, a politician or a pastor. And when I got to high school, I auditioned for the local art school and auditioned for band. And I was playing the xylophone. That's what I played in middle school, was the xylophone. And as a backup, I did acting just to make sure I got into the school. And I did, and I begged my parents to do 1 year. And of course, it caught on forever. And, I don't really feel like I had any encouragement to actually be an actor until I got to grad school at NYU. So I went to an arts high school, and for the most part, I grew up in Florida. So that's the South. And it's funny today when I say Florida, people are like, oh, but 10 years ago when I used to say I was from Florida, people are like, Florida's not the South. And now people have been very educated on how slow Florida is when it comes to progress and inclusion. And so I was never really into anything in high school. I was always backstage doing costumes or something. And the teacher, the head of the program there, really tried to encourage me away from acting. She was like, Lord, do something else, be a leader. And then I got to undergrad, and it was pretty much the same thing. I never really got cast in anything at college. So I found things outside of the University of Florida State. So I'd go to the community college, or like the Shakespeare Company when it comes to town, I would do that. And then finally I auditioned for NYU, and that's just because I saw an amazing play when I was in London. It was Jitney, and Stephen McKinley Henderson, some of like the greatest August Wilson actors were in this play, and it was amazing. And somehow I snuck backstage, and I asked them, like, how do I get to be like you people? And they said, go to school, go to grad school. And Yvette Garnier, who's an amazing actress, was the one who was like, yeah. So she put me in touch with people. And when I got to NYU, I was, Ron Van Loo was my main teacher there. And a lot of people go through NYU talk about him. And I felt like he was the first person who really saw like what I could do. And I really feel like that was the beginning of my career as when it comes to finding a mentor. Otherwise than that, I feel like it was self-propelling for.
So that you really had to than those few folks who were obviously, it sounds like they were key to you, but that you had to push yourself and have a job. I understand too, you crossed paths with Anjanou Ellis, or that she was a mentor to you as well. We were fortunate to have her on the podcast last year.
I saw.
Obviously this is one of my favorite conversations we've had on the show. But just, I don't know if you wanted to talk about her, or just folks like her that, as you I think alluded to a minute ago, that maybe were giving you a path in terms of, I could chart my way potentially like they have.
Yeah, Anjanou Ellis is somebody who came to NYU when I was there. I felt maybe I was a freshman when she came in. And she came in as like this actress I think she'd already done like the Ray Charles movie with Jamie Foxx, and she'd done so many amazing projects. And I just remember her sense of being was just so brilliant to me, and her work. And there's so many stories about Anjanou Ellis and about how talented she is, but I don't have like a mentor. Like, I feel like when people say mentor, it's someone who you call up. I feel like I have like invisible mentors, people who don't realize that I've been like watching them and like taking inspiration from them. And she's definitely one of those people.
Yeah, she's definitely that'd be a great mentor to have in any form. So you had some, obviously your studies NYU, Cassie, and then you've been able to obviously really build an incredible career. But I wonder, for folks listening who might be earlier in their journey, or maybe feeling like, hey, I'm a bit lost. I've been at this acting thing or this writing, directing thing for a minute, and I feel like I'm either striking out or not getting the sustainability of work and opportunity that I want. What was that? Did you have that experience earlier on, and how did you kind of manage or cope through some of those, especially those earlier days?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like that for everyone. It's very few people. I think Bruce Willis might be the only person who says like he showed up and like all the doors were open for him. And I think for men, sometimes when you look like an alpha male, the journey can be quite easy because it's a very saturated business when it comes to women anyway. And then if you're a woman of color, the opportunities get less. So then it becomes about like how to keep yourself stimulated and engaged and in the conversation in the midst of all of that. So you got to be constantly creative. I mean, for me, it's always been two things. It's like, one, how to stay present in a field that might try to make you disappear because of lack of opportunity. And then the other is like, what's my divine sort of calling in life anyway? And how can I do that? And so if I have something divinely that's calling me and I can do that, then when acting comes around, it becomes like this fun thing, but not a have to. I feel like because the career is so not a consistent thing, if you don't have something else, it will really steal your joy. So I've always had so many other things. I mean, I have so many other things that I put my time and passion in, but creatively, the things I would do. I mean, I had a podcast, first of all. I think it was called The Come Up with me and Margot Bingham. I did a web series called 12 Months of June, which is still on YouTube, which I did with a bunch of friends, and a lot of those people have gone on to be very successful. I mean, I think having the Issa Rae and Childish Gambino, like you just do things. If you're an artist, I feel like you can't help but want to create something. And that something is usually your own specific expression that you feel like is lacking. And so that's the thing that's always kept me very engaged. I always felt like there was a certain piece of my personality or character that was missing in mainstream. And I was like, I just got to keep honing that until it's perfected.
Yeah, so finding those, that's such a good point. Like letting yourself, almost allowing yourself, I hear you saying, to have those artistic outlets wherever it may take you, especially while a lot of times I think especially actors, but others in the industry feel like, I'm submitting, I'm auditioning and not hearing back.
Yeah, well, because it's a lot of not hearing back. I mean, you can do a TV series and maybe not hear back. You're like, do people even like this thing?
Yeah, right.
Hello. I mean, I have a friend and he's had so many pilots and none of them have gone, but he has produced and written these things and they go out and then like you didn't even know they existed. I feel like I remember I had a surprise dinner with Kevin Bacon, and Kevin Bacon, he's such a good person. He's like good, solid people. He and his wife, and I had dinner with him and my friend Eddie Cathegi, and I remember we were just talking about the industry, and I asked him the same thing, like how have you been able to stand in industry when things are so inconsistent? And he said, he said in so many words, like, you're not allowed to even call yourself an actor or an artist if you're not okay with that aspect of it. Like, that is the part of it. And the more history and research you look at what it means to be an artist, we're in like a rare time where you can even call acting a career and
Right.
artistry a career. Before this, it was really a gypsy lifestyle that you did on the side of the road, So I think you have to be an artist is a constant humbling process.
Absolutely. And that's such a
Have
great
perspective,
Yeah, to have perspective and have a sense of that history and the challenges that a lot of us are facing.
Right. And also like not take it personal. Like
Right.
when you go a year, 2 years, even 5, there's so many careers that go through rejection. Like actors are just the ones that they love to be like, how do you deal with the rejection? So many industries have rejection. There's a company I just got an email today from, they're going bankrupt. They had their own rejection. Companies that you hear going bankrupt, they're going under, that are restructuring. Like these are all types of forms of rejection, and they're having to deal with it in the economic capitalistic system that we live in. So I'm just like, you sort of have to embrace it and be like, okay, what do I do now? How do I surf this wave?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, it's cliche, right? How do you deal with rejection? But to your point, but like, how do you deal with rejection? How have you embraced it? I think it's to what you just said. Like, how have you found, I guess, maybe that grace or levity, or, is it making time to be creative? Is it community? Is it, how have you really managed to sort through some of that?
I mean, community is the key to everything in my life. Okay, without community, you are nothing. You cannot do this thing by yourself, and also you can't love yourself the way a whole community can remind you how to remind you to love yourself. But also, I, there was this epiphany I had maybe 8 years ago, and I feel like it really changed things for me, where it was like, when I don't get cast in something, it's rarely ever because I'm not talented. And so I take that off the table. It's never that I'm not talented. I am very talented. There is something that I bring to this field that is worthy of something to someone. But here's the thing, guys. It's like, I always give this example. And I said, if I'm making a movie about my life and I have to cast the person to play my father, and you have Denzel Washington, Samuel Jackson, and Morgan Freeman come into the room, and they're like, pick one of these men, I might say, I don't want any of them, and be like, where's Lawrence Fishburne? He feels more like the tenor of my father. It has nothing to do with the talent. I think acting, I feel like I'm a very spiritual person, and I feel like acting is very shamanistic. There's like this energy and spirit that people are looking for when they're trying to cast a piece of work. And these writers and these directors who put their life, sometimes 17 years into a script, when they're trying to cast it, it's not just talent. It's this thing that you can't see or define. It's your essence. And I have no control over that. So when it's not my role, I rarely ever, I'm like, oh, I remember I had a manager call me and was like, yeah, kid, they just didn't pick you. I'm so sorry. And I said, stop it. It's not about me. They need to find their person. It's okay. Don't get me wrong. Maybe once a year, there's a role that I really want, that I felt like, oh, my spirit is perfectly aligned and everything seems to be like it's going for me, and then it doesn't work out. I give myself like 2 or 3 days. I've even given myself a week, 5 days to grieve a loss of a role, because I started to like paint the whole future of what I would do with that thing. And that's okay. But it's rare. I'm like, it's gotta be no, I want everyone's project to be beautiful. And I only want God to put me in the space that I can be of greatest purpose for, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, there's that great quote. I think it's T.S. Eliot, but it's one of my favorites, about that, sort of all we can control is in the trying, sort of like everything else is not my business. Kind of.
Honey, the trying is like the whole thing. Like, did you even
Yeah.
throw your hat in the ring? I'm massively doing. I don't even try. I just massively do. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. I'm like, guess what? I did it. And the funny thing is, I think when you're young, you feel like, oh, it didn't work out. But as you get older, if you listen to people about what their career is, they never tell you if it was successful. They'll say, oh yeah, I had this thing when I was going, I used to have this business and that business turned into this role, but they have no idea, how did all those transitions happen? Maybe they were fired, let go, bankrupt, whatever. But it's the system. People want to know, are you a person who is about a vision and you go after it and you attempt to try to make it work? And it's okay if it didn't, at least you tried. And I remember my first year at NYU, they only let 18 people in, I think, a year there. It's a very competitive program. Yale, NYU, Juilliard are like one of those top tier schools that everyone tries to get into. And I remember the first day when we all got in, we're sitting in a circle and the teacher says, look around this classroom. You are not the best actors in the country. It's that you're the best actors who threw your hat in the ring. That's it. But there's so many people who are greater than you that didn't even attempt. So great job for even believing in yourself to attempt. And I was like, yes, I love this thought.
Yeah, that notion. And I wish I'm glad you're saying that, because I just think folks need to hear that, especially when they're tough times, which we, especially as artists, go through so often. And so I just love that. Let's talk a little bit about some of these projects before we get to Bel-Air, because there's just so much here, and we're probably gonna run out of time if we get to all of them. But I mean, folks may have seen you in Atlanta. You know, you've just done some incredible work, The Enemy Within. I was curious, like, you know, project like Spike Lee's Inside Man. I mean, Denzel Washington. Like, when you were able to start to get, I don't know, was there a point as you started to get traction with some of these kind of bigger profile projects where you started to feel, Cassie, like, okay, I you know, things are kind of becoming a little clearer in terms of this vision I've had for myself? Or has it always felt like you're climbing? I mean, describe that a little bit for us, if you would, that journey.
Yeah, I feel like if I had to, I talk very ethereal, I feel like sometimes, and I feel like life is like trying to cross a river and you just pray that there's another rock that your foot can land on to cross it. I know what it might look like once I get there, but I have no idea what's going to pop up. And listen, my whole, you know, youth was about idolizing Denzel Washington and Spike Lee. So who would have ever thought that would be my first thing?
Yeah.
And then there was actually, that movie came out, we filmed it in 05, it came out in 06. 07 was the writer's strike, and that shut down everything. So that stopped my momentum. I think the next thing I booked that was a TV show, and I was like a glorified co-star in I can't even remember, some show on CBS, but it was like a very small role. I'm lucky that I even had a name as that character. And then I had a role in Chris Rock's I Think I Love My Wife.
Right.
And thankfully that really helped me. But the writer's strike came, and then that stopped everyone's career. So any momentum I could have had basically got reset as if nothing happened. And how long did that strike last for? Like a good year or so. And reality TV became the thing. And so there was even less opportunities. So then I had to rethink like what to do in the midst of TV and film stopping. And I was living in LA. So I moved back to New York, and I was like, let's go back and do plays. So I started to do little small plays and things that are not on my resume, but that fulfilled me as I started to wait tables. And people be like, aren't you that girl who's in the thing? Yes, yes. But a part of the thing that keeps me afloat in this life is always thinking about like who I think I am now, even if you don't see the proof. And so even when I would be waiting tables or hostessing, I'd always be like, I'm like an internationally known famous actress. I am a beloved actress for her craft. And I would always just keep that energy in me, even when I was be like, would you like to have to drink tonight? That's but I feel like the road has just constantly appeared. And an actor's life is a funny thing, but I do feel like the roles that I embody are very much in the trajectory of like my spirit or something like that. Like these are things you have no control over. And after a while, you're like, I guess the kids in high school were right. I'm gonna play a leader, or something of that ilk. But no, my life hasn't been like that at all. I feel like Kate Blanchett would be like, after my sixth film, I started to see a trajectory for myself. And it's not like that for me. And I don't know many women of color who could say it's been like that for them. It's been 30 years since Angela Bassett was nominated for her next Oscar. And it's for a role that she's not even in the film that much for, you know?
Well, yeah, whenever we can talk about that, because I was going to ask you a little bit later, but I mean, you made two really great points, I think, at least there, both of which I wanted to ask you about. But one, just about what you said about women of color, not, historically, and certainly, I mean, even looking at the Oscar nominations this year and some of the other awards we've seen in the last few years, I mean, I would argue not getting A, the attention they deserve, the support they deserve, but B, that notion of a trajectory. I mean, have you seen a shift in terms of the industry being more inclusive or providing more opportunity? What does that look like from your perspective? I've asked Anjanu and others this question too, and so I'm just really curious, like, where does that sit for you? Do you feel like there's a trend line happening, or not really, in terms of inclusion and equity on this topic?
I'm a very optimistic person. So first I'm gonna say, yes, things are moving. Okay, first of all, I know they're moving because, I used to have these things called Black Dress brunches. And, there would be a time where no one in the room would have a job, but maybe one person would have a job. And now I have these And now if I have that party, like the majority of everyone in the room is working. So there is movement, and that has a lot to do because we have a billion channels. We're going to see what happens when a lot of these channels start to bankrupt and disappear. The quality of roles is a different conversation. And then when you talk about nominations, I mean, I hate that we're in an industry where nominations are even, if it were up to me, I would say, forget nominations. We should just say all of these women gave outstanding performances.
Right.
Period. Why does there have to be a best? I just hate the best. But the truth is, your career gets to have more momentum when you get these awards. So Sheryl Lee Ralph getting that award has totally changed the trajectory of her life. Like, and this woman has been a phenomenal actress forever, but now it's like people act like they found a four-leaf clover that has been in plain view forever. Right. So you can't deny that an award is very important. But at the same time, it's like, I think it's hard to be a woman. Again, there's a lot of women who become actresses, and it's a very saturated field. I don't think we'll ever be happy. I know the New York Times just came out with an article about why awards like systemically always lock out African-American actresses. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like, even for our show, like, I don't expect Bel-Air to ever be nominated anytime soon. Like, if we get it next year, that's great. But I have a quote that I created. And, they say, if a tree falls in the forest and no one there to hear it, did it make a sound? I feel like that about being a Black actor. Like, if you're a Black actor in a Black show doing an incredible performance, but no one white sees it, did it even count? And that's sort of the world it's like to be Black. It's like you could have done the best thing, but if no one white who is a critic saw it, it doesn't count. And it hurts. And it hurts, especially when you look at the beginning of so many of these networks, whether it's Fox, CW, like these networks started off of creating great content that had Jamie Foxx and Monique and Brandy and Martin Lawrence, like incredible content. All the Black people came. And then once they got to a certain level, all the Black content is gone. Now, if that's not racism, I don't know what else you call it. Like, what happens? You can't be talented on Monday and obsolete on Friday. So it feels like I'm living on a Black Mirror episode. And I just put on my TikTok, not on my TikTok, on my Instagram recently. I said, I love it when they ask white people, what is it like to play an affluent white family on TV? What is that like? I'm like, I don't even want to answer that question anymore. I am so over it. What do you mean? It almost, you're purposely saying, all Black people are broke and dejected and unemployed and uneducated. That is what you're saying. So ask Succession, what is it like to play these affluent white people? Is it weird to play? You think it makes white people feel good to see rich white people? What do you think? Billions. What do you think, guys? No, but they love to ask us that on Bel-Air.
On Bel-Air, yeah, it's like it's just like, wow, this must be such a unique experience for like the entire cast and crew. Yeah.
So, and your character takes a shower every day. What is that like?
Yeah. I mean, it's not even. Yeah, and it's just not even coded, right? I mean, it's barely. It's not even, I mean, people talk about dog whistles, right? But it's not even, I mean, it's not even.
It's not, but but I have such compassion because it just proves that we're all swimming in a water and we don't know it's what, like the fish know they're swimming in water. I don't think they know. I don't think we realize that we're swimming in this. And, the way people they're trying to loosen the barriers around gender. It's like the next frontier is like loosening the ideas around Black and white. And like, I hate to even have to say Black and white. My son is biracial. My husband is someone who looks white. So, but I wish there were new terms, because as long as we keep saying Black and white, everything is very divided.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's been the history of this country, certainly, and obviously of many parts of the world, and that we're still very much living in, of course. I mean, I'd argue work like Isabel Wilkerson's cast, which I think Ava DuVernay is making.
The Mother Sons, all those casts
are so really important. Yeah, are so important for folks to have that base of knowledge, especially white folks. I would argue.
I mean, especially, I just think it's interesting that in school, like even you don't want to teach about, African American history here in America, which
Mhm.
is just crazy talk. Okay, but why not just? I The thing that has always kept me rooted is the idea that there was a time in this country where people who were African, Irish, and Native Americans came and they overthrew the government because they were tired of living hand to mouth. They were so poor, they were starving, and they took over. I think his name was Barkley, like the mayor of that time, chained him up, and basically the elite said, okay, fine, we will wipe away your indentured servitude, okay? But here is the heroin bait of racism, which is, what about this? Black people, you'll be indentured forever, and all of your offspring will be too. And white people will let you go. You don't have a debt anymore, and you can be the warlords basically over these Black people. What do you think? And
Right.
white people didn't gain any more access, any more food, but they got to have this sense of privilege. And it's like a puppet show we've been involved in ever since. But Black and white didn't even exist until then.
Right. I mean, for example, my family is Jewish Americans, right? Like them coming over, they identified primarily as Jewish. And then this notion of whiteness, right, is sort of, we could go through the whole history. A lot of folks listening, I'm sure, know it well, but just to your point, this notion of whiteness essentially created, Jewish Americans, immigrants, Irish folks, others like assimilated into that, and then sort of the privilege piece comes in. I wonder, like in the context of this, Cassie, you could talk about what you alluded to earlier with Bel-Air, because it like you said, I mean, the response to it, I imagine it is layered and connected to what we're talking about. But also, like, what does it mean to you to be part of this project now, especially because it's, I've heard you talk a bit about just the process of being cast in the project and what it meant. But I wonder if you could just share for our audience, like the meaning of that, and what do you think the impact of the show even is in this context?
To me, the I can only say, I look at the comments that people say, and you start to come up with an average of what these sayings are. But to me, I feel like there's just this feeling from my community of it's like a balm to the soul just to see love and forgiveness on a platform. That's it. It's revolutionary to still be loving and kind, and to show a family trying to work through their difficulties instead of a family gaslighting each other. It's not that type of show. I think people would be surprised I'm surprised more people who are not African American aren't surprised that it's a show that really is based on like uh, a different type of masculinity, a different type of vulnerability that comes out of this community. And then family is actually your greatest wealth, even though their names are the banks. Like that's really what it's about. And I say this a lot about, it's an old quote, but it's true, which is, charity begins at home. And so this is someone who opens up their doors and they're like, you can have everything, but including love and understanding. And it's interesting because the people behind the scenes, the producers and the actors are just good people. And the actors who come through the show, they always say like, oh my God, it's like a beautiful balm to the soul just to be around creative people. We're only there to do and give goodness. And it's great to sit in the seat of characters who are like that too.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, and it is really, like you said, truly family forgiveness. I love that I love that you're like highlighting those themes for folks. I just want to also ask you about playing the specific character of Aunt Viv, because she's described as kind of walking away from this promising art career, and she's been compared to like a Michelle Obama-esque type character, someone who's very obviously driven, intelligent, thoughtful, layered, loves their family and their deeply, but also has these ambitions themselves. I wonder if you could just talk about what you think the impact of her is, and why you were drawn to it. I mean, at least speaking personally, the Michelle Obama comparison is powerful, right? Because I'm of a generation that was part of the Obama campaigns and was part of sort of that moment in history, and seeing the first lady and what she did to the country and what she represented is really powerful.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's interesting to me because I grew up surrounded by Michelle Obamas.
Mm,
It's and so for Michelle Obama to get the microphone, Barack Obama, I just think it made a lot of us be like, thank you. This is the kind of woman I'm used to seeing. Thank
mm,
you. And I think the same is true for Aunt Viv. Aunt Viv and Michelle Obama, I don't know if it's on purpose or it's a coincidence, but I don't think it's a coincidence. I just think it's a rare role where you kind of get to see, I don't want to say the average Black woman, but the average Black woman of this ilk, what life is like. And so people project a lot of that onto Aunt Viv. But I mean, there are a lot of women on TV who play like a certain type of white woman. And you're like, yeah, I know that lady. Like, but you don't get a lot of these type of people on TV. Even though it's a norm in a lot of our communities. So for instance, like Michelle Obama talked about how she couldn't wear braids when she was in the White House because she knew what a ruckus it would be. And let
mm.
me tell you, I felt that way this season. We try to do more braided looks and my stomach would hurt because I thought, I don't want to scare white people. They're going to think she's too militant. And then people really covet Aunt Viv. Is Aunt Viv allowed to have braids? And then I look back at Janet Huber, the first Aunt Viv, and her hair was natural. She didn't have a perm. She didn't wear wigs or anything. And I thought actually it's very much still in that trajectory. But Michelle Obama is so many of us. And so I feel like almost anything I do, it can't help but feel like Michelle Obama, because for many people not in this community, that's their first touch point of that type of Black woman. And my father, he was a news reporter, but then he became a teacher at his later days, and he taught a predominantly white school. And for a lot of those kids, that was their first touch point of that type of Black man. And my dad would dress in suits. He was 6'7", deep voice, magnanimous, charismatic. And so for them, they were like, there's a Black man that exists like this in the world. And I'm sure that's how people feel about Michelle Obama. But for some of us, it's like normal, but we're just happy that to have a platform where it's like, you see, guys, let's all look. It's hard to put into words, but I'm very emotional about it. And when I got to meet Daphne Maxwell, I was very emotional to meet her because these images do mean a lot. This is all propaganda. And our biggest export in this country is our culture. And when you get to have something like this that represents your culture to other cultures around the globe, it means a lot. The impact is serious. And my aunt and uncle are huge African-American art collectors, one of the biggest ones in the country. And when
Mm.
they had an exhibit in Hong Kong, people there were like, what do you mean an art exhibit? Like they thought it would, I kept hearing the people come in who spoke English saying, so there's no rap or basketball.
Wow.
They were very confused. And I'm like, I get it, because our biggest export is rap and basketball. Like, and let's even go further into what else that must mean.
Right. And that like to your point, that matters deeply. It matters in the US, of course, to kids growing up and people that see those images, but also around the world. And so I think having that agency that you've talked about and talked about here too, to be able to create this character and have it be a multi-layered, multi-dimensional, successful, driven.
It's so important. What Michelle Yao just did in Everything all at Once. Okay, best movie of the year. Just give them all the freaking awards, but also just to bring the humanity to the little Asian lady and the family who owns the laundromat down the street. How many times have those people been invisible to us? And someone created an entire world to be like, we should be paying attention to each other. All this humanity around us is so rich and beautiful. That's the power of TV and film. It's a great place to escape life, but it's also a great place to figure out how to embrace our humanity and others too.
Yeah, to build empathy and to see each other fully, if sometimes for the first time, to your point. I guess my last question is just, you just made a great comment on Instagram and here too about that notion of putting out into the universe what you want to be and do. You talked about it when you were waiting tables. You talked about it on Instagram too. And I just love that. And for folks who are listening, what would you say on that point of just this notion of kind of putting on repeat, both where you want to go, but also the kinds of images and the kinds of characters and the kinds of stories you want to tell? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, on my Instagram, for those who didn't see it, I do this whole thing where I say, whatever you want to be, you have to start talking about it now. Like, if you can't talk about it, it's going to be damn hard for it to show up. And this has been true. That's like the biggest thing in my life, where whatever I'm up to next, I tell people. And then my example, my Instagram was like, I said, oh, I want to be like on Sex and the City, but like the Black version of Sex and the City. And so I'd be out with my girlfriends, be like, yo, doesn't this feel like I'm like on the Black Sex and the City? Yo, look at this out. Doesn't it feel like I'm like, and until it like manifests. And then it did. It was living in, Single Ladies. And I have so many examples like that in my life where I would just talk about it. And the other example was like me being a professor. Oh, I'm ready to be a college professor. And then I'd say, I'm about to be a college professor. Where are you going to be a professor? I don't know. Do you know someone who I should talk to? Like, that would be my conversation until finally it kind of happened for me. So I think it's important to tell people what's inside of you, what you want to do next, because everyone's holding a key and they're excited to give you the key to unlock it because you are someone's answer. And when it comes to stories, we are still on the precipice of so many stories that have never been told, never been seen, never been thought of yet. Because you're still dealing with a generation of people who are finally coming to grips with that idea they have. It might not need to be mainstream for it to be important. I love hanging out with people, African-American people. Many of us spend a lot of our times about, but what will white people think? How can we translate this to white people? It's like everything's about how do we get the white gaze to understand something? And white people don't live in that. They're just like, and so I had this idea, and then I thought, why not? And I was like, oh, there are beams here, and maybe it's not Earth. And it's like such a freedom. Well, I think this new generation of kids who are coming out, they have so less of those barriers. And with that are new stories and new ways to even tell stories. Morgan Cooper, who created this, came from a different generation. He wasn't born in 1979 like me. He was born later. And so it just came to him, was like, why can't it be a drama? Why can't I actually just put together my own little trailer for what that would look like? So I'm excited for what storytelling will look like for people like us. And I'm just excited also for Hollywood to become more integrated in general. And that segues into my company, Creatricity. I have a company called Creatricity. It's my startup for Hollywood. But really, the mission of it is really about, I'm just so passionate about Hollywood being more integrated. And there's so much money being left on the table when things are not integrated. Okay. McKinsey report came out that there's like $14 million or something crazy.
Yeah, I think $10 billion.
Actually, yes.
Yeah, that because of specifically only for Black inequity, $10 billion left on the table, and that's just for the Black community.
It's just for the Black community.
Yeah,
and so, when that came out, I was in the middle of building this company already, and I was like, yes, why is it not more integrated? And I'm sure racism exists, but I really feel like what it is that we all live in these bubbles and we don't know how to penetrate those bubbles. So I thought, why not create a company where I create events once a quarter, where it brings all these different segments of the entertainment industry together, of vetted people from the entertainment and media sector. So whether you're a director, producer, cinematographer, whether you're the greatest hair person, like heads of departments have to be able to be a part of these conversations too, to break down some of the inequities that happen behind the scenes as well. And then on top of that, like, what are the conversations and like what new beautiful creative things can happen? But it's through integration. But people need authentic ways to meet and to bump into each other. People meet each other about 3 times. They actually start to create a rapport. And I like to believe, and what I know is that when people meet me, they're not like, oh, scary Black woman. They're like, oh, this is a cool Black gay lady. Oh, why haven't we worked together? Maybe we should work together. You bump into someone enough times, that might happen. And so we created an app so people can communicate easier that way as well. And then the future of it will be, they say in Hollywood, it takes a minimum of 17 hours to fulfill a job position, a minimum. But for those of us, we know it can take up to months even to fill out positions. And so a part of this app is like, can we just do it faster? So if you're a producer and you're looking for content, but you have money, it should be like in a moment. It should be like the whole community going back and forth and vice versa. There are just so many examples of people. And anyway, I am Creatricity because people call me up all the time and they're like, Cassie, do you know an Asian DP? Yes, I do. I do. Here, meet him. This is basically to fix my pain point, but my pain point is so many of our pain points.
I would love to work with you on that, and I'm sure folks listening would also love to hear more about that. So
yes, please.
Yeah, and that's because that is that in point about integration, but also just access. I mean, and I think a lot of the folks we work with in our community of underrepresented talent are I think feel excluded, frankly, or discouraged, or all of the above, because they don't know where to start, where those access points are. So I really love that.
Well, yeah, there's two big problems. One problem is okay, you're in the industry, you've been vetted, you've done something, but now it's stalled out. There's like this thing that happens that makes it hard to get to the next level. And so a big part of that is just that the community doesn't know you. The entertainment industry is very siloed off into little different departments, so everyone feels like they're not in the room, but it's like you are in the room, but there is no real room. So this is my way of trying to create a room of sorts. And then the other big problem, and I'm sure there are many problems, but this is what I've discovered in the last 3.5 years of trying to put this thing together, is the pipeline problem. So then you also want new talent, the new people with vision, and how do you bring those people into the industry? And the funny thing is that people who are vetted, and I've asked the 300 people who are part of this now, they would love for actually the new people to have an access into, because like I'm always looking for a personal assistant. I'm looking for someone to do social media for my company now. They could come maybe work for free for 2 months, but then we could finally put them on budget somewhere, or we are looking for new videographers, right? Who are trying to become DPs. But if you do great videography, you get to meet the other DPs who come. Like there's an apprenticeship that lives in Hollywood naturally, but I don't think the apprenticeship really helps people through the longevity of their career. Instead, it's like, oh, I did this one thing and it didn't go anywhere. And you're lucky if that one thing goes somewhere. And so I'm just like, we're in community. We should all be leveraging each other's talents and work so we can create the thing. What Morgan Cooper created is him leveraging his vision and his eye, and he found great actors in his town of Kansas City. He didn't have to come to California to do this thing. He did it there. And my thought is you should be able to do it anywhere you want, but do it in a click of a button, and you might be surprised. Maybe I want to come there. We're going to open up our next one in Atlanta. We did 2 big things in New York, 2 big things here in LA. We're going to do something else later in this first quarter, but we're going to pop up in Atlanta and Chicago and slowly like try to fill in the gaps. But I really want to work with Morgan Cooper to even get to Kansas City. I'm like, there are more people like you in Kansas City?
Yep.
Of course there are. Of course there are.
No, I love all of that. Let's connect offline about it, because I know folks listening to would love to hear more about that and find ways to plug in wherever they are in the country, or frankly around the world too, because I think even in our connected world, there's still a lot of folks who are trying to be in that pipeline and are working their tails off, but I feel like they can't get to that next level. So
exactly.
Cassie, it was really an honor having you on. Again, the latest project is Bel-Air. It's premiering Peacock on February 23rd, season 2. You also have a bunch of other projects in the work we're excited to see and hear about really, really soon. So
we have a new movie at South by Southwest. I forgot to say that in my last interview too.
Let's get, you got Story Ave going. I understand you have obviously Our Son with Luke Evans, Billy Porter. So lots up ahead, which is really
lots of things ahead. Honey, thank you for telling me. I forgot.
I got it in my notes, so we're trying. But again, Cassie, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jared. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.